Let's start tonight in the book of Proverbs, chapter 18. So if you would open your Bibles with me, the book of Proverbs, chapter 18. We're obviously continuing on with the study of trying to build families by the book. And tonight's, I've become convinced that a lot of the repetition in preaching is what Peter said, trying to stir up your pure minds by way of remembrance, just to bring us back to and remind ourselves of what the Word of God has to say for us and to us. And this tonight is absolutely that, a reminder of what the Scriptures has to say about the tongue and about communication. As we're trying to grow together, as we're trying to build a home on the basis of the Word of God, we've seen the role of the husband as a leader, as a provider, as a protector. We've seen the wife assisting him and honoring him in these areas. And as any two people that work together to one common goal, there needs to be an increasingly deepening level of communication. And Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 21 says this: "Death and life are in the power of the tongue. They that love it shall eat the fruit thereof." Now, my understanding of that is the fruit may be good fruit, sweet, healthy fruit, or it may be bitter fruit, depending on how you use the tongue. It's interesting that the very next verse is, "Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing." So that the communication aspect is what we want to look at tonight. And again, it's a stirring up of your pure minds by way of remembrance, to quote Peter. We know these things, we've heard these things. Nothing that I can say in this area is going to be deep or profound or anything you haven't already heard. But like in any partnership, it may be you might illustrate it with a partnership at work. You might illustrate it with a business partner. You can illustrate it just two people that are planning something together, that have a common goal at the end. There has to be a level of communication. And that level of communication has to be two-way street. And that level of communication has to be growing. It is easily, and I'm not talking about just saying words. What has recently been impressed upon my heart and mind is that you can say a lot and say nothing. I mean, watch any politician at any given moment. They can say a lot and say absolutely nothing of substance. Communication has to have some substance to it. There has to be a level of learning and sharing and seeing what the other person is thinking and feeling. I am convinced that no area of our marriages will be right without good communication. Not the physical aspect, not the emotional aspect, not the spiritual aspect. They all have a basis in being able to communicate. And I don't even want to use the word talk. To communicate feelings on a level that is substantive. So we start with communication tonight. We remember, as we've all learned for years and years, communication is both verbal and nonverbal. Right? Seth didn't say a thing a minute ago, but I knew something was up. he had a nonverbal response that I said, what am I missing here? All of our communication, most of our communication, maybe more accurately stated, has a component of the obvious verbal part of it, but that nonverbal part, we need to be just as aware of that. Because we can say the right words, but give the wrong body language, and they're not going to get it, or it's not going to be helpful. So we're going to look primarily tonight at the verbal. Proverbs 18:21, death and life are in the power of the tongue. There's so much good, a word fitly spoken, pictures of gold. There's so much good that can be when we have that speech seasoned with salt, that fitting word at the fitting time. So much good that can take place. There's so much harm that can take place. Many, many, many times. Harm that was unintended. Harm that there was no intention of causing any hurt whatsoever, but hurt nonetheless we can, with the wrong words at the wrong time. And now, as with any two people, you take even a pitcher and a catcher. They can communicate, and they have to. The pitcher and the catcher have to be able to communicate, and without that communication, they cannot work together. And any two people are in the same boat. It is an absolute requirement that husbands and wives are able to communicate and really share. Look back up a chapter or two, Proverbs 16:24. Pleasant words are as an honeycomb, sweet to the soul, and health to the bones. There are those words that are helpful. They're coupled with the right body language, and they're helpful. They project love, they project empathy, they project what's needed at the time. And I noticed in 18:21 that we were reading just a second ago that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. There is definitely going to be an outcome of the words we use. There's definitely going to be some fruit. We're obviously hoping that it's good fruit. We're obviously hoping that it's sweet and pleasant fruit. Another thought on the tongue. James reminds us that the tongue is like the rudder on a ship. It's just a small little component on a very large vessel, but it directs and it steers and it moves the whole vessel with just the tongue in James 3. And so there's so much power, good and bad, in the tongue. And probably the unfortunate thing is the home is the first place where we let down. At work, probably we're trying to be very careful. I mean, we're pragmatists, right? We're practical. We can't lose our tongue to our boss. Doesn't go well. And we don't want to lose our tongue to our coworker because we try to maintain a good testimony and opportunity to talk to them, and so sometimes we would desperately like to share a piece of our mind, and we choose not to because we want to just keep it professional, not run off into this tangent. But at home, unfortunately, that's many times where we let down. And our spouses get the leftover of trying all day not to say the wrong thing and trying all day to say the right thing, and then we go home and we say the wrong thing sometimes, or we say nothing. And it's the first place we let our guard down. And sadly, it ought to be the key place that we share our heart. The key place that we express from the deepest level how we feel. And as the head of the home, what I'm trying to do and the direction I'm trying to go and why this is important to me, and as the one assisting him in that, she's sharing how she can and how this helps and how this doesn't help, and there's this open channel of communication that's vital as they work through the various roles that they're trying to fulfill. And it would be like having no communication between the head of the home and the assistant to the head of the home. Having no communication there would be like making it so the pitcher and the catcher can't communicate to one another. And the catcher's not telling the pitcher what pitch to pitch, and the pitcher's not telling the catcher yes or no, and neither one of them know what the other one's doing. So the catcher's down there and he's ready for a straight fastball, and the pitcher thinks, now would be a great time for a great curveball, and woo! And he flies one off out in the corner, and the catcher wasn't ready for it. Back to the fence it goes. He didn't know that was coming. And that simple illustration of the importance of communication gets carried out in so many multiple ways every day. So if we can learn to talk through things before they become big things, if we can learn to work our way through those things and get to a place where it's beyond just saying the words the other person wants to hear, but sharing, this is my heart. Because the reality is, if one spouse doesn't listen to the other, somebody probably will. And a line of communication can get opened in an area that it ought not to be opened. A line of communication can start, and deep, intimate thoughts and feelings may start to be shared in a direction, in a channel that there's no right place for that. And so it's so important that those things are learned at home. It's so important that you're able to talk through things and not have just dead silence. The power of the tongue, life and death, marriages can live and die by good communication or no communication, bad communication. Realizing that love is a command of God by the husband, he needs to understand her and what communicates love to her. And that can never be fully realized unless there's a good channel of open communication. It's always interesting to go to a restaurant. Well, we get to go to restaurants pretty soon, I think. Hopefully. I mean, if you want to. Because it sounds like they're going to open stuff up. But wherever you are, you're at a restaurant, you're wherever you are. And you can see a young couple that's maybe they're just getting ready to get married, they're just married, and man, they're just staring into each other's eyes, and they're talking, and they're just almost to tears as they share their hearts and their goals and their dreams and their plans and how they're going to get there. And then you can watch the old couple that's been married 30 years. The waiter comes over, they order, and both of them turn away. Or nowadays, look at their phones. Oh, did you say something? And a few years ago, that wouldn't have been the way, would it? A few years ago, that wouldn't have been the way, because they'd have been looking at each other's faces and staring into each other's eyes. Now they're staring at the walls, staring at the phones, not knowing how to communicate with each other, not knowing how to share, not knowing how to get down in the deep waters of the pool and say, this is what I'm feeling. And this is what I hope to accomplish, and why. And as the head of the home shares that, the assistant says, well, this is how I can help. This is what I think will help. Do you think it'll help? I've often had the conversation back in the days when I had a part in hiring employees for the factory, and we would interview a few people, and then the owner and I would talk, and he would always ask me, do you think this person will be helpful in the task that you're trying to fill? And he always asked that question. And as we communicate, there may be an idea, there may be counter ideas, there may be a back and forth discussion, and at the end of it, do you think this will be helpful? I see, and I love the fact that you give me unconditional love, and I love the fact that you're trying to lead in a godly direction, and I think that this is how I can help. Do you think that will be helpful? Or is there some reason that you would not find that helpful? And that conversation, it's just an illustration. But an illustration of how important communication is. Look with me in that was this morning. Ephesians chapter 4. I don't even have Luke in my notes anywhere. I don't know where that comes from. There's many, many passages in the Scriptures about the tongue, about communication. In Ephesians chapter 4, the first part of verse 15. Speaking the truth in love. Now, he's in the context of spiritual growth, and he's in the context of a church setting, but it's an applicable goal to speak the truth in love. You try not to use the truth as a hammer. And that's a lot of our body language, isn't it? That's a lot of the nonverbal portion of communication. But that we're speaking the truth in love. Over in verse 29, he says, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister unto the hearers, grace unto the hearers. Now I know this is not necessarily, not restricted to the marriage setting, but it's still good wisdom from the Scriptures. Let no communication, no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying or building up. And that picture that we started with in Proverbs 18 about that life and death is in the tongue, in our lips, what we say. And may it be that we never use our words to tear down other people, especially the one that now we are one with, especially that one that we have pledged, and they have pledged that till death do us part. We are one. And remember, the goal of this all along was never simply to endure 40 or 50 or 60 years with somebody, but to love it, to be happily, joyfully fulfilled in this relationship. So, we've studied this before. Everybody's thought on it. Everybody's used the same reminders and illustrations, but it's just stirring up your pure minds by way of remembrance. There are deepening levels of communication that have been identified by many, many people. And you just start off with what you say to somebody in the elevator, right? Hi, hi. I love it when you say to somebody, how you doing? And they say, well, really, today kind of stinks. Oh, good, glad to hear it. Don't think you were listening. You were expecting, good, how's your day? Great. That's what you do. There's a guy that comes into work every day, and we kind of have the same little fun dialogue. And I hope that I would catch it if he said, Randy, today really kind of stinks. I would hope that I would catch that, but let's just say I would hope that I would catch that. But you have that introductory level of, how you doing? Great, good, glad to hear it. See you tomorrow? Yep, see you tomorrow. And then you have a shade deeper. Boy, it's hot today. Yeah, I know, man. I was really hoping for cool and 65, A little deeper, you've got some facts in there, you've got some details. And then you work a little deeper and you get into, what do you think about this? Now you're getting dangerous, especially in the workplace. Now I know I'm not primarily talking about the workplace, but you really have to tiptoe into that in this politically polarized climate. And I don't even mean politically in the sense of left and right politics. I mean, just everything is political. What do you think about it? Well, what I think, and ooh, you got to be careful. But it ought not to be a dangerous thing to say to your other half, to the one that you are united with till death do you part. What do you think about this? And then the interesting thing is, listen to hear what they say. Somebody said, you can listen about 4 times faster than someone can talk, so you're using all that extra brain power to compute what I'm going to say next, then I'm not really listening at all. I'm thinking about what I'm going to respond with, because I already know I agree or disagree. So now I've just shut it off, and I'm thinking, when they get done, this is what I'm going to say. I'll get a zinger coming, just stop talking so I can spit it out. And we're not communicating. We're not listening. We're not hearing. And then you get to the point where you're, with a level of vulnerability, sharing your heart. Peeling back the layers of your heart and sharing it with this person that you know good and well. If they had a mind to, they could use that against you, and they better not. But now you're out in deep water. Now it's vulnerable. They know the most intimate things of your heart, which is a good thing if used properly, which is a needful thing so that we understand one another, but don't ever use that kind of information as a club or as a way to get even or as a leverage. don't ever use that kind of information. As Proverbs 18:21 said, that there's life and death in the tongue. And we get somebody to share their heart, and we share our hearts, and then at the right moment, in the heat of anger, come back and use it against them, or come back and tear them down. No, the idea is building up. The goal here isn't to tear down. The goal here isn't to hurt. The goal here is to heal and help. And these things apply in every aspect of our lives. As it relates to communication, some have found Chapman's book on the 5 love languages to be helpful. Some think it's hogwash. Some have found it helpful to identify the 5 that he mentions. One are words of affirmation. Just that's the thing that speaks to someone. And again, communication is how we figure out where we are. And various kinds of communication, verbal and nonverbal. But he identified one way is just words, just to say, I love you, and I respect you, and I admire you, and just words of affirmation, compliment, encouragement, so on. And that may really hit the spot for some. Some like that, but even more need quality time. He identifies the second one, quality time. Just doing what that person wants to do without distraction. And to know that if that is someone that you love, if that's the thing that really speaks to them, to know that and say, I'm going to give them quality time. That's the thing that speaks to my partner. Some may like some kind of presents, tokens, gifts, something that says, hey, I was thinking about you. I care, I was thinking, and I wanted to do this. And then that speaks volume. Oh, you were thinking about me. And those things, if identified in our lives, in our mate's life and heart, those things may be very helpful to understand where they find this concept helpful. Some are all acts of service. You demonstrate to them by helping them, by doing something for them. And that can be a great nonverbal communication, that language that says, I love you. And because I love you, I'm going to, I don't know, paint the deck, whatever. Because I love you, I'm going to. And then obviously, a key component, a key language is just touch. Not intimacy necessarily, just touch. And maybe that melts the person's heart. Maybe in a hot water and rub their feet. Feet are killing. Just touch. And to have the level of communication that we can figure these things out. To have the level of communication that says, this works. This, I can see this. I can understand this. Or this doesn't. But all of it requires effort on both parties. All of it. And without meaningful, productive communication, there cannot be the closeness that there could be with it. And that's going to take both of us talking and communicating. I was trying not to even say the word talking, because talking is not necessarily communicating, but really conveying ideas, thoughts, and emotions, and creating an environment for the other one that they can, that they will, that they feel comfortable, they know it's not going to be used against them, they know that this is, the goal is for the betterment, and so we create an environment where I'll share my heart. I'll, good, bad, and ugly, I'll give it all. And then you're getting somewhere. Then you're swimming out in the deep end of the pool. But that's where life for the marriage can really begin, as those thoughts are conveyed. In the spiritual aspect of the marriage, there has to be communication as well. That ability to relate to each other on an understandable level. And we learn that dialogue through trial and error. We learn what dialogue works and what dialogue doesn't, how to communicate and how we don't. All of it. All of it takes labor and all of it takes effort. But this is basic. This is 101 stuff. And tonight my goal wasn't to teach anything, really, just to remind you, just to remind me, just to remind us. This is the heart of a good and growing relationship. Let's stand.